It's a Thursday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. We are introducing the Locked On NBA Top 100. Going to spend the next couple of shows talking about my thought process as I submit my names from the Memphis Grizzlies for the ballot. Plus, old friends over at SB Nation talking about the Grizzlies being in purgatory. I'm not so sure about that, although I guess there's a difference between purgatory and the other place. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Locked On Grizzlies. It is I, your host for this episode, Joe Mullinax. Yes, that is right, your host. Life happens this time of year, man. DeMichael Cole and I promise you, we will be back together. DeMichael, of course, my amazing co-host, Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. We're going to have DeMichael back again. He was there yesterday, obviously, for a solo show. He and I will ride once more, I can assure you, once life calms down a little bit for the two of us here at Locked On Grizzlies. But that's no excuse. You want to hear Grizzlies basketball talk. This is not Locked On Joe Mullinax and DeMichael Cole's lives. This is Locked On Grizzlies, and you've come to the right place for Grizzlies conversation the next 30 or so minutes. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts as proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Google, YouTube, Amazon, literally anywhere you get a podcast, you have access to Locked On Grizzlies. Hopefully you're an everydayer at this point. If not, if this is your first time checking us out, hello, hi, welcome. So glad that you're with us. Hopefully you'll stick around today and every day moving forward here on Locked On Grizzlies. We start off with a bit of an announcement. There might be a better sounder in our system here, but I like making the noises myself. If you're an everydayer, you already know that. The Locked On NBA Top 100. This is a summer project that we are starting to embark on at the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And the journey begins with the top 100 players in the association. Other establishments, The Ringer, ESPN, they have their rankings. Locked On has grown by leaps and bounds. We're going to start doing similar stuff. And again, part of the logic is we are experts on our own individual teams. It's safe to say that I know more about the Memphis Grizzlies than most people that cover the NBA nationally, and I stand on that business, as a matter of fact. So why not get in on the fun here and have a top 100? We're starting the process in the next couple of days. I'm going to talk you through. DeMichael and I, we had a conversation about it. I set the list. He made some edits, and here we are. The first piece of the conversation, up for votes, because the way that we did it is you rank the players on your team 1 through 7. Obviously, I don't think the Grizzlies have 7 guys that are going to make the top 100. But in my 1 through 7 starts with the question of who's number 1. A lot of folks out there would say that Jaren Jackson Jr. is the best player on the Memphis Grizzlies at this point. He was the 17th rated player in the NBA by all NBA voting, right? Makes sense. He was a player that had a tremendous year, just signed a near max extension, all those fun things. A two-way weapon that the Memphis Grizzlies, you could argue, have never had before, right? Marc Gasol was a dominant defender, did lots of things well offensively, but he was not the scorer that Jaren is. Zach Randolph, awesome offensive player. The Super Zebo run, the tenacity of his game on that end of the court was a lot of fun to watch unfold. Not the best defensive player. In terms of two-way contributions, obviously that is not Ja Morant's bag either. So if you want to tell me that Jaren Jackson Jr. should be number 1 on this list for the Grizzlies in particular, I am happy to hear that argument, and I can't wait for you to yell at me in the comments on YouTube. Hit me up on X at Joe Mullinax. However, in my rankings, I put Ja Morant number 1 on the Memphis Grizzlies, and I put Jaren Jackson Jr. number 2. Here's why. Ja Morant is a superstar. When Ja Morant is playing at the level that he is capable of, he is an MVP candidate. We've seen it. It has physically happened before. Ja Morant has had numerous accolades, won numerous awards. Most Improved Player, Rookie of the Year, Ja Morant has been in these conversations as a dark horse MVP candidate. Jaren Jackson Jr. has not. So while I get that it is a what have you done for me lately kind of situation, and I think there's fair, logical reasons for pointing out those things. I get it. I am going to ride with Ja Morant as my number one on the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, are both Ja and Jaren two of the top 100 players in the National Basketball Association? I would say yes, of course. I would say there's probably not 30 players better than both of them in the NBA. If they are not top 30 on this list, I'm going to be very upset with my fellow co-hosts and hosts. I'm interested to hear DeMichael's perspective on all this as the list progresses over the summer. But what I am most interested in is that idea of now versus overall, right? Because Jaren Jackson Jr. is the better player in this moment. But obviously, careers are not moments. There's a lot of in-betweens from moment to moment. And yes, perhaps you can critique my choice, saying that I am basing it off of the idea of Ja Morant. Are we sure that that Ja is still there? Well, I would like to point out to you the way that he played to close out the season after the Taylor Jenkins firing into the playoffs, before he got hurt against the Oklahoma City Thunder in that game 3. He looked very much like one of the top 10 or 15 players in the entire National Basketball Association. He was putting up some of the best scoring numbers of his career. He was doing a lot of things on an impressive clip or at an impressive clip. He was dominant at times. So dominant, in fact, that the eventual NBA champions in that game 3 in Memphis were on the ropes. Oklahoma City was down by 20 plus points to the Grizzlies in that game 3 before Morant's injury. Ja did well this past season when given the opportunity, especially in the ECLO era. He has room to improve, of course. Everybody does. And if Ja is going to get to the level that the Grizzlies need him to get to in order for them to be a legitimate playoff contender once more, he's got some work to do. But I am not going to just simply forget. I'm not going to have the instant gratification mindset that so much of our society today does. I remember. I have seen what Ja Morant is capable of. And there were flashes of it as recently as 3 or so months ago. And because of that, Ja Morant is my number one on this list. Now, I'm not saying he's number one in the NBA. That's probably Nikola Jokic or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And we'll talk more about that as the list gets finalized. Remember, this is me talking through the first piece of the process. What Grizzlies are going to be under consideration? And my fellow hosts and co-hosts, our fellow hosts and co-hosts, because DeMichael helped me in this, we are being depended on. So when my fellow co-hosts look at our list and they see that we have Ja Morant 1 and Jaren Jackson Jr. 2, that is going to be their clue that as they go about their eventual 100 ranking, when that step of the process begins, Ja should be in front of Jaren. That's how I feel. Ja's ceiling is higher, and it's not wishful thinking. It has literally happened. Ja had some of the best basketball of his career just 3 or so months ago. Does it need to be sustained? Of course. Has the suspension and the injuries and all that sort of stuff derailed his ascent? To this point, yes. But I saw enough in that post-Jenkins early ECLO era to know that when Ja Morant is right and when Ja Morant is present, he is the absolute best player on the Memphis Grizzlies. And that's not disrespect to Jaren Jackson Jr. Jaren deserved the extension he just got. Jaren is absolutely the 1B on this team, but Ja Morant remains 1A for me. Let me know what you think in the comments. Hit me up on X at Joe Mullinax. Again, we're going to be talking about these rankings often over the summer. Several episodes worth of content coming your way on the Locked On 100. This is just the start of the process. And when we come back here on the show, another question for this episode. I have Ja 1. I have Jaren 2. Who the heck is 3? We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Stick around. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by OpenPhone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time that you had an urgent need, maybe for a plumber or a service provider. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on. That's why you need OpenPhone. OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app on your phone or computer. The shared inbox feature is a game changer. Your team can jump into any conversation instantly without missing a beat, and their AI agent handles after-hour calls, answers common questions, and captures leads so that you never miss a customer. OpenPhone is offering our listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedonnba. That's openphone.com/lockedonnba. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers. So the next piece of this puzzle, this Locked On Top 100, and again, we're going to keep talking about this, but to close out today's episode with this topic, we still have to talk about the Grizz being in purgatory, apparently. To close out this topic, we are going to talk about who the heck was number 3. Santi Aldama, right? Tricked you. That's called a bait and switch. That's a swerve, baby. Because hopefully you're an everydayer at this point. And hopefully you're thinking, wait, you and DeMichael talked about this like a week or so ago, and you said Santi was your number 3 right now. Yeah, Santi absolutely was number 3 on our list. Is Santi a top 100 player in the NBA? Probably not. I'm going to have a hard time squeezing him in. I am a homer after all. I'll try to see on my official ballot if I can get him at number 99, maybe. But it's hard to say Santi's in the top 100. Maybe once I actually see the list of names, it won't be as hard. I think the Grizzlies very likely could just have 2 guys on this list, and we'll talk more about that. But this isn't about who's number 3. Santi Aldama's number 3. This is about who's number 4. Who's the 4th best Grizzly at this time, eligible for consideration in the top 100. Now, once again, almost certainly not going to be on this list, right? But we're still ranking guys. And as you get towards the end, Jaylen Wells or Ty Jerome, who gets the nod at number 4? And there's arguments for both of them, right? Ty Jerome hasn't played a minute for the Memphis Grizzlies yet, literally just signed his contract a day or so ago. But Ty Jerome has an offensive game that is going to be, and I stand on what I said a week or so ago, a couple weeks ago, Ty Jerome is going to be what Grizzlies fans wanted OJ Mayo to be. He is going to be a microwave scorer off the bench that is a combo guard that can play next to Scottie Pippen Jr., John Morant, or the other guy in this conversation, Jaylen Wells. Ty Jerome can play alongside all 3 of those dudes. Extremely valuable, right? Extremely valuable. Ty Jerome is not a good defender, however. Part of the reason that he saw his value perhaps slink back a little bit from that performance in the postseason is if you are going to be a net negative defender, you sure as heck better be an offensive weapon more often than not. And for a lot of reasons that weren't necessarily in his control, but some that were, he had a really bad shooting and scoring performance in a playoff series for a team that had higher aspirations than where they got eliminated in the second round. So he was not brought back by the Cleveland Cavaliers. They were over it. The Grizzlies, not over it. They see the potential in Ty Jerome, and they think that he can be that offensive weapon that they need. We will talk more about this, but we've already had early discussions. Can easily see him closing games and offensive possessions as an offensive-defensive switch with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. There's a realm of possibility there, and that is worthy of discussion for your 4th best player. However, Jaylen Wells exists, and Jaylen Wells, for me, is the 4th best player on the Memphis Grizzlies, and he is the 4th best guy on this list, which means Ty Jerome is number 5. Jaylen Wells has been a topic of conversation among Grizzlies fans. It's blown up in our own comments here on YouTube. I really think that the perspective of Jaylen Wells has gotten drastically out of proportion. First off, you have to remember where this young man was drafted in the 2nd round. I am not stuttering when I say he was the best overall pick of the 2024 NBA draft because the value was there. He was a second-round selection and an all-rookie first-teamer in his first season in the National Basketball Association. Does he have elite athleticism? No. He does not have elite athleticism. Does that limit his ceiling? Absolutely 100%. Is Jaylen Wells ever going to be more than a starter in the NBA? Probably not. Can he be an elite role player, like DeMichael has talked about constantly on this show? Yeah, I think he can be. And that's extremely important. You need that. But to look at his shooting numbers in Summer League and try to pretend that that's a legitimate concern. I talked about it the other day. Josh Selby was a co-MVP of the Summer League for this team. Folks thought that Jordan Adams was the second coming of James Harden on this team because of Summer League positioning. Summer League is full of lies and mistruths when it comes to shooting numbers and scoring potential. That's not why you should watch Summer League basketball. Why you should watch Summer League basketball is to see how they fit within the schemes that are being implemented. Are they in the flow of offense? Are they participating well defensively? Are they missing rotations? What does the form look like on their shots? Are they progressing in the spaces where they need to improve? Jaylen Wells is a facilitator of offense for others. Jaylen Wells, in terms of his handle, doesn't have to be James Harden or Kyrie Irving or even John Morant. Doesn't have to be that level of player. All that he has to do is find space for himself to either make a decision to get the ball to a teammate or get to the basket on his own. Be enough of a threat with the ball in your hands that defenses have to respect you. Not just because you're a shooter, which Jaylen Wells absolutely is, but because you are a capable ball handler too. Still room for helpful growth in those spaces. But he was a rookie this past year. And he is somebody that has a frame, length, a mental fortitude that you know his game is going to grow. He has a high floor. And when you are in this new CBA era, where you are going to prioritize maximizing two contracts, the Grizzlies have chosen John Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr., the two names that we talked about earlier in the show. So now you need guys that amplify what they do well. And if you're going to have John Morant as your starting point guard of the future moving forward, you need to have someone that can defend next to him and cover up his shortcomings on that end of the floor. Jaylen Wells can do that. Jaylen Wells is one of the better perimeter defenders the Grizzlies have had since I've been covering this team back to 2012. Not the best. Tony Allen exists. Dylan Brooks exists. But Jaylen Wells brings something to the table that those two guys didn't. Consistent ability to space the floor. Jaylen Wells can't be expected to be something that is too lofty for him to achieve. If you view him through the lens of a reliable starter that's a two-way player that can be a 3-and-D with a touch of ball handling, good decision-making, if that's the way that you view this young man, you won't have an issue putting him as the fourth best player on this team right now. I certainly didn't have a problem with it, and I love Ty Jerome. I'm a big believer in Ty Jerome. I'm going to miss Desmond Bane, but I've got a new man crush. It's Ty Jerome. So Ty Jerome has the capacity to be exactly what the Grizzlies need alongside Santi Aldama. Now you've got a Santi combo forward big that can score. You've got a combo guard that can play the 1 and the 2 and can score. There's good balance there for the reserves in terms of scoring pop and punch. But Jaylen Wells is going to be a starter. At least he should be. And questioning it, I struggle with. So if you're one of the folks that doesn't see what I see in Jaylen Wells for some reason, because you're letting Summer League cloud your vision, and I don't know how that's possible. When I watch Jaylen Wells, I don't want him to play Summer League basketball anymore because I've seen enough. I've seen enough of the young man. I think he's great. Because I'm not concerned about shooting 7 for 16. I'm worried about him being in a position to contribute on both ends of the court, because you have to remember, he's not going to be playing with Cam Spencer as a starting point guard. He's not going to be playing with Armando Bacot as a starting big. The level of help is going to rise, just like the level of competition is going to rise. And when Jaylen Wells is in that space, I've seen him contribute, and I fully expect him to continue to do so and continue to improve. Let me know on X at Joe Mullinax. Hit me up in the comments. So if you haven't figured it out, there's the top 5. John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., Santi Aldama, Jaylen Wells, Ty Jerome. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about the rest of the list and how that can fit into the overall scheme and span of the NBA's top 100. Should we be concerned that Memphis probably only has 2 top 100 players now? We'll talk about that as well. When we come back on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to close out the show. My old friends over at SB Nation saying the Grizzlies are in purgatory. How do we feel about that? Stick around here on Locked On Grizzlies. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by the good folks over at Monarch Money. Have you ever wished that managing your money would feel easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings, planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. I loved that I could track my accounts with my wife, my partner in crime, so to speak, as we go on this journey called life. The ability to see what we're spending on subscriptions, what you're spending on takeout, what we're spending on our kids. It allows for us to have greater context of not just saving money, but actually building wealth as retirement comes in, the next 25 or 30 years. I'm going to be working for a while. And thankfully, the good folks at Monarch Money helped me realize that. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. Closing out this episode of Locked On Grizzlies, again, my good friends over at SB Nation. I used to write for SB Nation, used to run the Memphis Grizzlies blog. Make my day on a Thursday. Hit me up on X at Joe Mullinax. Hit me up in the comments on YouTube. Tell me if you remember those GBB days. It'll always be Grizzly Bear Blues to me, baby. I loved running that blog. I left a lot of my own creativity and self. That blog has spawned a lot of impressive careers from our friends Parker Fleming, Sean Coleman, Chip Williams does great work. Lots of different people, Bryson Wright, Molly Morrison, who's over with Bleacher Report now. Lots of folks that have done really good work over the years have gotten their start at GBB. And that's one of the points of pride for me personally, is knowing that I was a small piece of that puzzle for some of these folks. So I always will have love for SB Nation, and I have love for Ricky O'Donnell, who gave me the opportunity to be an actual writer for the site for a year after GBB went under, and they made the redirect of their plans of how they run SB Nation. So no ill will towards them. Loved SB Nation and my time with them. I wish GBB still existed. 6 NBA teams stuck in purgatory. That is what Ricky O'Donnell wrote a couple of days ago. And I know DeMichael talked a little bit about this. Ricky wrote about the Memphis Grizzlies. I wanted a chance to respond myself here. The Grizzlies were the league's model small market franchise before the Oklahoma City Thunder took that crown from them. Yes, that is true, right? New contenders have risen in the West, and the Grizzlies are stagnating without a ton of room for improvement. Talks about the firing of Taylor Jenkins, trading Desmond Bane. Talks about Ja Morant not being able to stay on the floor. Hasn't looked like a top 10 player in a while. The Grizzlies are clearly the best run team on this list, and the list is Memphis, Phoenix, Sacramento, Toronto, Miami, and Chicago. So he says the Grizzlies are the best of the 6 here. The front office does a fantastic job every year in the draft, always works hard to uncover hidden gems. Quibble with the Grizzlies' inclusion on this list if you must, but they either need some lottery luck or for Morant to roar back to all NBA form if they don't want to get lost in the West crowd. So for me, reading that article, and again, shout out to Ricky, it's 6 NBA teams that are stuck in purgatory over at SB Nation. I said it was nasty business to include Memphis and not New Orleans, okay? And I don't regret that because I agree. I would say that New Orleans is in a much worse spot. Ironically, Ricky agreed with me and said he didn't include New Orleans because New Orleans is in hell, right? They're in basketball hell, whereas the Grizzlies are in basketball purgatory. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the term of purgatory, Catholicism uses this idea, other sections of Christianity. It's a space that you go to between heaven and hell, right? You're just kind of stuck in the middle. When you look at it through that lens, and you're willing to acknowledge that Memphis is the best team on that list, and you're willing to say that other teams like New Orleans are in worse position, I'm not as mad at the article as I once was. Upon further review, his argument is very fair because one of two things has to happen for the Grizzlies to really bounce back soon, for them to get back closer to OKC, because they are closer to the lottery at this moment than they are a championship contender. But Ja Morant bouncing back, I don't struggle with seeing that happen. Because again, I watch the Memphis Grizzlies. Ricky covers the NBA for SB Nation. And I'm sure he's watched some Memphis games, but I'm doubting that he and the rest of those that cover at a larger scale level. And again, I wrote for SB Nation for a year on the national side of things. I get it. There's times where I would try to write an article about Kevin Durant. And I watch KD every once in a while, but not as much as I watch the Memphis Grizzlies. So I get that perspective. But I saw Ja be a top 15 or so player in the NBA over the end of the regular season and into the playoffs. I saw Ja Morant be the spark plug for that Game 3 stunner. It was shocking. Memphis was going to win Game 3. You can never convince me otherwise. If Ja Morant stays on the court and finishes that game, Memphis wins Game 3 against the Thunder. Do the Thunder still win the series? Almost certainly. It ain't a sweep, though. It ain't a sweep. And we're having a different conversation about this Grizzlies team, I firmly believe. But Ja got hurt. Ja gets hurt often. Ja had the suspension. Can you count on him? And that is your inflection point when it comes to how you view the Memphis Grizzlies. And it makes total sense because I've said it on this show. I've said it other places. If Ja Morant isn't there, nothing else matters. Jaren can be an all-NBA player, and Memphis will be in the lottery or close to it. They'll be in the play-in. 9 seed, 10 seed. Because if Ja Morant is not able to be the guy that the Memphis Grizzlies need him to be as a superstar player, what he is paid to be, then yeah, the Grizzlies are in purgatory. Closer to basketball hell. But I saw it. I seen it with my own eyes. I don't expect Memphis to be a top 3 seed in the West. But if Ja is what I think Ja can be, they're a playoff team. They're not in the play-in. They're the 5 or 6 seed in the Western Conference. And if you're assuming health for other teams, if you're assuming progression for other teams, Victor Wembanyama missed a large chunk of the season due to injury. And again, I don't wish blood clots or any injury on anybody, and I want Wembanyama to play. But if we're assuming Wembanyama's not going to miss a bunch of games, why can't we apply that same logic to Ja Morant? Precedent exists for both of them that they're going to miss time. So if we're being consistent, and Ja Morant's going to be out there 65 or so games, the Grizzlies are a 5 or 6 seed in the Western Conference, and that means Ja is a top 15 or so player in the NBA. And hopefully they get that lottery luck thanks to Phoenix not being so good. That would be nice to see as well. But shout out to Ricky again. 6 NBA teams stuck in purgatory. He fairly acknowledges there are teams that are worse, and he fairly says that Memphis is the best team on that list. But do you agree with the purgatory statement? Again, I think his argument is sound, but I'm just more optimistic about Ja than perhaps maybe I should be, but I'm going to stay that way because I saw it. I saw him bounce back at the end of the season. Thanks so much for being with me on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. It is much appreciated. Tomorrow, it is Friday. You know what that means. We got to get down on a Friday, and we are going to talk about Summer League once more. We're going to continue the conversation about the Locked On Top 100. 5 of the names have been revealed. Who are the other 2 that I submitted for consideration? Again, do I think Memphis is going to have 7 names in the top 100 in the NBA? No. We'll talk about whether or not we think they'll get more than 2. But I do think that it's important to have the full 7. We'll talk about that. Talk about who else. Does Santi crack the top 100 in the NBA? And we'll take a look at how the Summer Grizzlies are doing. That'll be our Friday edition of the show. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing wherever you get podcasts. We're proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, YouTube, any of those spots are good to become an everydayer to the podcast. And thank you for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen today. Now, for your second listen, find the Locked On NBA podcast where there is no offseason. Doug, Matt, and Hayes keep you up to date on contract negotiations, rumors, and everything you need to be the most informed NBA fan. Find Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being with us on this Thursday edition of the show. We will catch you on Friday. We will be back with you talking NBA Locked On Top 100 some more, and also how the Summer Grizz are doing. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Google. Have a great rest of your Thursday. We'll see you back here tomorrow on Locked On Grizzlies. See you.